I'd always said to her, Amber, one day you're gonna let me do your makeup. I just never dreamed that it would be for her funeral. I have had intimate connection through makeup with every presidential candidate in the past 6 elections. I can't not talk to them because they could be able to bring about change. You know, and many of them in the beginning when I would tell them, you know, are you aware of the heroin epidemic? They'd be like, what? What heroin epidemic? It took the life force out of my husband and I when we found out that she was arrested for heroin possession. She had a pimp, was being sold, and paid in heroin. And my husband looked right at me and he said, she's gonna die. And 2 years later, she did.
The number one problem in America today is the opiate and heroin addiction. It has been so pervasive in small town and rural America that for the first time since the 1800s, the life expectancy of middle-aged, non-college educated white Americans is going down. It is a crisis.
Look at the heroin epidemic that is going on in our country right now. And we're not doing anything to stop it. It's almost like we want a bunch of addicted people.
Heroin is a killer drug doing devastating harm in New Hampshire, Vermont, and all over this country.
You know, look, I know New Hampshire in particular has been hit hard. The heroin epidemic is really ugly.
This disease knows no bounds, knows no income, knows no neighborhood. It's everywhere.
The situation that we're encountering right now is so beyond what we would expect to see on a routine day or month or year. 2015, we had 726 opiate-related calls. We're looking at a 300 to 400% increase.
There is a heroin epidemic, which is pretty much a national epidemic. It's felt really heavily in New Hampshire at the moment, and I think New Hampshire has thrust the issue into the forefront on the presidential campaign because it's a question you hear, if not once, twice, 3 times at any town hall that you go to, because it affects everyone here. It's your waitress, it's your next door neighbor, it's a bartender.
How many of you know people suffering either from a mental health problem or substance abuse? You know, I've had 2 town halls right here in New Hampshire, one in Keene, one in Laconia, where the only subject was substance abuse.
My older sister, Miriam, died of a drug overdose. And she had a hard life. She made a lot of foolish decisions over and over and over again until one morning she didn't wake up and she'd overdosed. It is a horrible scourge in our society.
I mean, overall, I think the problem is a perfect storm of our own creation. We had prescription drugs that were being prescribed without a stringent oversight. The Mexican cartels figure out how they could grow and manufacture their own heroin. Everything was there.
I'd shattered my ankle and had some major back problems. Became addicted to opiate pain medication, was overprescribed to like huge proportions.
Oxycontin kind of made its way to everybody, so it was very easily available. That's how I started.
It's definitely not something that I made in a choice when I was a young child, to wake up and say, I'm gonna be a drug addict when I grow up.
I had no idea like what I was getting into at that time.
My addiction drove me to homelessness, 31 incarcerations, and I lived homeless for 13 years on the streets of Providence.
For the last 18 months or so, the heroin and fentanyl crisis has really reached epidemic proportions in the state of New Hampshire. Unfortunately, approximately 10% of the overdose calls that we respond to are fatal. When there's a delay in calling us, we miss that 4 to 6 minute window where when you stop breathing, death becomes permanent after 6 minutes.
I would say that the people who are owning the issue are Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush, Chris Christie, Carly Fiorina. And I think Carly and Jeb stand out to me because they're two people who've personally been affected.
We finally managed to get Lori into treatment, into rehab. And she suffered from multiple addictions. There are real things that work for some people. Unfortunately, they didn't work for our daughter.
There is a shared bond in this. People that go through this. I mean, I don't know what it's like to lose a daughter, but I almost did. She went through hell, and so did her mom, and so did her dad. And it was both in a private setting, but then it became very public when I was governor, and it wasn't easy. You know, so she went to. I visited her in jail. Never expected to be seeing my beautiful daughter in jail.
I am frustrated, incredibly frustrated. Frustrated that we have made so little progress in 3 decades. Today, 129 people will die of drug overdose in this country. 129.
You know, you kind of go outside in the world and it's a sunny day, but all you see is gray. It's not black or white or anything, it's just like gray, like nothing.
I can't even tell you how many funeral cards I have in my wallet at home, and you know, just from last year. And it got to the point where I stopped attending services because it was just, it's too much.
You get so used to that, that misery, that darkness, that like it's comfortable even though like you hate it.
I'm afraid for my daughter, for my friends' children, because I know that a really big reason that a lot of people wind up addicted is because of an injury, maybe a sports injury, a car accident, something else. The doctors and the medication.
Out of over 100 people I talked to that we revived, 60% of them said, yeah, they started with pills. They started with a prescription. It started with an injury. Everybody out there nowadays gets prescribed narcotics. You go and you have your wisdom teeth taken out, you're walking out the door with a script. You know, and that's kids 11 years old.
In the last 3 months alone, we prescribed 650,000 individual prescriptions for 33 million opioid pills. Every year it's getting worse and worse, and now it's obviously reached a level where it truly is a crisis in our state.
So I went to law school, and one of the guys that was in my study group, he was the first one of us who got a job. He was running one day and hurt his back. And so he went to the doctor, and so he said, listen, we're gonna give you some treatment, whatever, but in the meantime, just to help you get you through, we're gonna give you Percocet. Help numb the pain. Well, about a year later, I get a call from his wife. And she said, he's addicted to these painkillers. So we all went over there, we had an intervention with him, and it started a 10-year odyssey of him being in and out of rehab. When a year and a half ago on a Sunday morning, Mary Pat and I got the call that we've been dreading forever, that they found him dead in a motel room with an empty bottle of Percocet and an empty quart of vodka. 52 years old. He's a drug addict, and he couldn't get help, and he's dead. And when I sat there as the governor of New Jersey at his funeral, and looked across the pew at his 3 daughters sobbing because their dad is gone. There but for the grace of God go I. It can happen to anyone.
Everybody outside of it, including my parents, was under the impression it was a moral failing. You know, it was this mistake I made, and now I'm paying for it, kind of thing.
I knew it was a problem. I didn't know what to do. And my life was definitely spiraling out of control.
The 6 overdoses that I survived. That goes through my mind how lucky I am to be here today. Had I been using alone, I wouldn't be here today. Had Narcan not been available, I wouldn't be here today.
Narcan is naloxone, a drug that's manufactured specifically to counteract the effects of opiates. When you use an opiate, it attaches to certain receptors in your brain. When you use Narcan, when it's administered to you, it goes directly to those same receptors in the brain will remove the opiate particles from those receptors and create a barrier around it to prevent them from reattaching.
Oxygen is the most important thing when you first get there, and the Narcan. What we'll do is you pop off the top of this. You take the vial, you'll insert it, we rotate it, and what it does is it actually locks in. And you administer half up one nostril, half up the other. People tend to take heroin. Their veins, they have problems with it. So again, this is an easier way for us to administer it.
Narcan itself is just like you see in the movies. It works. It's a miracle drug, really, is what it is.
You can't go through that as a family and not realize that addiction is a disease that touches everyone. There's still so much stigma about talking openly about what a problem this is in our nation. And we can't have a stigma, because otherwise we won't do the right things.
We need to be a second chance nation. We need to recognize that restoring people's chance to be able to live a life of purpose and meaning doesn't just deal with the illness of drug addiction. It also deals with giving them a chance to get a job and to do the other things. And drug courts provide that opportunity.
One of the most important elements to dealing with the drug problem is finally securing the borders. The drug cartels come across that border almost at whim. We are finally going to build a wall.
I remember being at Hope for New Hampshire and having them tell me about someone who had come in with their parent who was at that moment suffering from withdrawals, and they just simply couldn't find a bed for that person. There was nowhere for them to go.
The problem with New Hampshire is we rank 49th out of 50 states in availability of treatment and recovery services.
I know a lot of the people in treatment, and I know I've called, I've reached out to people, but it's just the beds aren't there.
I've lost a lot of friends to opioid overdose, and if a candidate is not talking about being part of the solution, that candidate's not getting my vote.